Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the November 18th, 2025 work session of the Town of Austining. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay.
Thank
Here.
Councilmember Meyer,
Present.
Councilmember Fields Toil,
Here.
Supervisor Feldman.
Present.
We have supervisors' announcements.
Okay. The new federal eligibility requirements have taken effect for the SNAP program. Please reach out to the Department of Social Service by calling 914-995-3333 for any assistance you may require when navigating these new regulations. Sustainable Westchester has informed us that the Westchester Power Renewable Energy Program will be discontinued at the end of this year. Starting with this December's utility bills, customers who take no action will be returned to Con Edison as their default supplier of electricity. For questions about the Westchester Power Program or to learn more about Sustainable Westchester's wide-ranging services, please email info@sustainablewestchester.org or call 914-242-4725 extension 128. They are also trying to compile a list of the different ESCOs, different alternatives you may have. That is not together yet. They said maybe a month or two. This Friday, November 21st, Craven Jamaican Cuisine will be celebrating its 10th anniversary. This event will be located in the Ossining branch, which is its very first store at 109 Main Street, starting at 1 p.m. This Friday and Saturday, Up the River Dispensary will be hosting its grand opening celebration. The ribbon cutting ceremony will be Friday at 4:20 p.m. Well, the celebrating will continue into Saturday with food trucks, live DJ, exclusive deals, and more running all day long. Adults only. This weekend is also the Campwoods Holiday Craft Fair, located at the Campwoods Auditorium off Campwoods Road in Ossining. This highly anticipated family-friendly annual event features one-stop high-end seasonal shopping for unique handcrafted items by talented local artists and craftspeople. This Saturday also marks the 10-year anniversary of the Bethany Arts Community. Their celebratory gala will include live music and a silent art auction. It's not too late to get tickets at www.bethanyarts.org. Okay. Galata House is partnering with St. Anne's to provide a Thanksgiving meal to all members of our community that would like one. This year's festivities will be held Sunday, November 23rd from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. In addition to providing 1,000 sit-down meals, they will be delivering 700 additional meals to disabled people and seniors throughout Westchester. The Ossining Community Thanksgiving Dinner will be held on Thursday, November 27th, Thanksgiving, at noon at the First Presbyterian Church at 34 South Highland Avenue. No charge meals delivered or eat-in. For delivery, please call 914-941-0540 to reserve your meal. The Northeast Etsy Artists Collective will be hosting their winter market at the Ossining Public Library. Shop handcrafted goods from local artists and makers on November 29th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. The Town and Village Joint Senior Holiday Lunch is scheduled for Tuesday, December 2nd at 12 noon at the Cortland Colonial Manor. There will be great food, DJ, raffles, and more. You must RSVP at the Rec Center by November 21st. So by this weekend. Please remember, Neighbors Link is a great source of information for community, for immigrant population. Please visit their website, www.neighborslink.org, for more information. And our Ossining Public Library has many events, including movies, craft events, meditation, tutoring, yoga, book clubs, and more. Please see their website, ossininglibrary.org, for more information. And the Loft LGBTQ+ Community Center has events, programs, resources, and presentation, all dedicated to providing support to anyone who's a part of the LGBTQ+ community. For more information, please check out their website at loftgaycenter.org. And for many more fun and interesting events being held locally, and there's a lot, See my supervisor's update on the supervisor's webpage. Thank you. Too many.
Okay, we have our departmental report, our town building inspector, John Turnquist.
Yes, to lift it up.
Right, thank you. Okay, good evening. I'm John Turnquist, the building inspector. We've been busy in the office, doing various things. The ladies are doing a lot of, answering a lot of phone calls, complaints and things that are coming in, backflows, title searches, scheduling, inspections. There's pre-planning meetings going on, possible projects, coming on Albany Post Road. There's a chapel at St. Augustine, small. We've had a number of meetings about these, type of things. Various inspections, building, plumbing, HVAC. It's a routine that goes on every day. There's fire inspections, checking for smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, sprinkler systems, and fire egress. Accessory apartments as well. We've had some phone calls with complaints lately, various things, cars parked in driveways, overcrowding with cars, boats. Seems to be becoming more prominent. Businesses that are running out of houses, that have cars and vans. And it's overcrowding sites. So I'm following up on these complaints. There's a couple of items in court, they're the ongoing ones that we've had for the past couple of months. They've adjourned it and they're working on plans to remedy their problems. One of them is a site plan, the other is site work. And two of them are site plans. They appear to be in resolution and they do have an attorney present. We should know further in December. They've been given a deadline. I'm not sure what date. I think it's December 2nd. I'm not sure. Other than that, we've had 116 permits in total since 9/1. That includes building, electric, plumbing, title searches. Building permits, we've had 30. And the various permits, decks, additions, alterations. Plumbing permits, and they usually, they go in kind with the building permits. So if you're building something, you have to get a plumbing and electrical permit as well. There's some zoning board variances, also deck, shed. People, there's some legalizations going on, shed in the front yard of a property. Variance for decks that didn't have records from the past. We have to upgrade the records and then they have to file a new plan for zoning. Those are just a couple of items that are coming up, I think, very soon. What else? I have fee report, January till now, $140,325. That's a total of the fees that came into the office. Now that's basically what our day and week is every week.
Okay. You have any questions? Okay. I know you work on the stormwater reporting as well as also working on the county hazard mitigation report also, so.
Yes. Mhm.
So. Okay, thank you, John.
All right, thank you.
Okay, give it a moment.
Getting here in perfect time. We're going to be having a discussion on the town of Austining open space plan. We have our town planner, Valerie Monastra here, and I will be putting up the presentation in a couple seconds.
Here. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm here tonight because, if you recall, at the last, town board work session, we started talking about some zoning and town code updates that we're going to be undertaking for, over the next few months. And one of the aspects, we were talking about was looking at doing implementation to the for the open space plan. And so I wanted to kind of highlight, just kind of really briefly, I think I provided this board copies of the open space plan about a month ago. I know everyone had a chance to take a look at it. I also did a prior presentation on it. So this is really a truncated version, but really it's specifically going to be talking a little bit about the potential zoning and town code updates that we would like to recommend in order to implement the recommendations from the open space plan. And then once I get the green light from this board tonight, we'll start developing those, the exact zoning text amendments that we would be proposing, and then we'll bring that back to the board. So, the open space plan, if you can just go to the slide. All right, so basically, just to kind of reiterate, the open space plan, it's really basically identifies natural resources, your existing preservation lands, and also recreational resources. It prioritizes areas for preservation and conservation, and then it also outlines strategies for conservation of priority lands. So specifically for Ossining, we looked at the relationship between the large underbuilt, can you go to the next slide and give you a chance? Thanks. And we basically looked at the relationship between larger properties within the town and the environmental resources, as well as your recreational resources and future recreational plans.
Christy, can you pull that up just a little bit?
We also specifically
Thank you.
focused on tools for conservation and how they might apply to each particular parcel. So things that we specifically identified is, could there potentially be some acquisition or donation of land, voluntary conservation easements, conservation cluster subdivisions, natural zoning, resource zoning, and then zoning overlays. So I wanted to kind of just sort of highlight, and again, as we talked before, the open space plan will eventually have that adopted. You can go to the next slide. We'll eventually have that back to the board for adoption, but you can go to the next slide. But the key findings is really what I want to focus on tonight. And so the areas of importance, specifically in terms of natural resources, we identified the Indian Brook Reservoir, Croton and Hudson Rivers, Rock Hill Ponds, and Sing Sing Kill. And then also the wetland areas, which are primarily around the streams and waterways. Next slide. So we also specifically found key findings dealing with core forests, important terrestrial wildlife areas, and they clearly correlate with your forests as well as your wetland areas. And a lot of that, as you can imagine, is around your Indian Brook Reservoir. It's also borders the town of Newcastle and a lot of their forested areas. Next slide. The other thing in terms of conserved land, there is definitely connections to neighboring communities, especially in Ossining and Newcastle. Also, it's also associated with like water resources. And then also we think that there's additional linkages that could be further explored as part of the preserving some of the natural corridors that already exist. Next slide. So we also took a look at your underutilized lands, and this really focused on unprotected open space. And so this is space that is either privately or publicly owned. Specific private institutions included like Mary Knowles Seminary, as also St. Augustine's. The other thing is with the vacant and undeveloped lands, we also looked at lands that might be improved or could be developed or further subdivided for those particular properties. And so if you go to the next slide. So in this, one of the and so in the other maps that we found, we noted all the different private institutions and also private vacant and underdeveloped land, and those are identified in the gray and the purple on the map on your screen. So what we did was we combined all these various parcels. Next slide, Martha. Specifically to highlight key areas, which is water quality, recreation connectivity, core forest, forest habitat, and wetland and water courses. So if you click on the next slide. So what you have in your little, the handouts that I handed you is the map of the key strategic parcels, as well as a table identifying their specific resources and why those are important properties. And so as you can see, a lot of them either focus around the Indian Brook Reservoir, Cedar Lane Park connectivity area. There's also a number of groups that's dealing with focusing on near Northern Forest Preservation Area. And these really deal with forest habitats, steep slopes, wetlands. You have some of your Maryknoll Seminary connectivity area, which we're calling, there's large scale private institutions that could potentially be redeveloped at some point, and Ryder Park expansion. And this is one areas where there's some connectivity between some vacant lands as well as close to your parks. So in terms of recommendation, Martha, if you can get next slide. We were really focusing on potentially doing like clustered development amendments, focusing on your subdivision regulations and really trying to promote that cluster development if some of the larger properties ever do get redeveloped. Also expand the applicability of the cluster development so that potentially we could expand it to some of the other properties in terms of like a conservation overlay. So to kind of require clustering as opposed to something that's a traditional subdivision. Also look at potentially incentivizing the use of cluster developments. And then also establish potentially higher standards for subdivision and site plan review within the Indian Brook Gorge watershed. Overlay protection district. And then finally consider a conservation overlay district for very specific key identified parcels. So if you can go to the next slide, Martha. So this is really the table. So if you look at properties numbers 1 through 20 on your map, those are all fall within the Indian Brook Gorge overlay protection watershed protection district. So for the most part, we were looking at the and the town board just recently adopted that overlay. So we were looking at that overlay, and I think there are a few things that we're going to potentially have as suggested tweaks to the overlay that will further protect these particular properties, especially dealing with the Indian Brook Reservoir, maybe some additional buffers, specifically, focusing so that if any of those properties do get redeveloped, that they would have additional resource protection, especially for drinking water protections. Then we were also looking at the strategic properties, which are 21 through 28. And those are, I'm going to say they're further south and they're further south and east on the map. And those really focus on, those are larger lots that could be subdivided. And those properties we'd like to consider doing like a conservation overlay district. And then really reviewing the cluster development regulations and your subdivision regulations to really try to promote that if they do get subdivided, that you would potentially have clustering as opposed to something of a traditional subdivision. And that would be something that we would work, closely with your council on that. But those, we think that focusing on one component with the properties 1 through 20 under the already existing overlay protection district, and then focusing on some of those other larger properties, which are the 21 to 28, in terms of really trying to protect those in terms of future subdivision.
Okay, there's a possibility that Maryknoll, both sisters and brothers, already has a protection
There's
conservation.
already
overlay.
one, and we already have it mapped. on our, we already have it mapped on one of the maps of conserved lands.
Okay,
And so that is identified. It's actually, I have it here, but it's on the open space protected lands, and it's, if you look at your map, it already has it there in the Mary Knoll Conservation Easement. It's next to 23 and 24. There's another purple and like an orangey kind of,
right,
that's the conservation.
okay. So HOA lands are,
Yeah, it's like, it's the way, it's because the green, when it goes on top of the purple, it makes it a little bit pinkish. We can kind of tweak that map a little bit, but yes,
Okay.
it's the, that's the Marino, and you can see that it goes further into Newcastle as well. Okay, north. So yeah, so that was taken under consideration, so that's why that particular property has not been identified as like, concern for future subdivision, because there's really now only a small portion of it that's not in the conservation. But 20, on your map, 23 and 24 could technically be subdivided into single family. And we would like to consider looking at that as for clustering, so that if future,
okay.
leave-
Somehow I thought one of those had something, but
No, they don't.
all right. I believe you.
So, so I wanted to get a sense from this board, if you're comfortable with kind of what we're looking at, potentially, moving forward with in terms of some of the amendments to the zoning, as well as I'm gonna say the town code, because it would be the Indian Brook Gorge Watershed Overlay Protection District. And then we can come back with you with actual, details starting next month.
Yes, definitely. Always interested in protecting our drinking water in any way, shape, or form we can. I think some of the closer properties, we're in conversation with the owner that would like to put it into conservation of some sort. He's just exploring all the different options and tools that we have, and it's in the beginning of the process, so. So that's helpful.
Yeah, and
Yeah, I mean, we have so few open spaces, I think that, protecting them now and putting the overlay districts on now is vital in my eyes. So I'd like to hear from the rest of the board.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of the best things our board can do. So happy to support it, and thanks for all your work.
Yep, I think it's a step in the right direction to get it all done, and then, we're not really handcuffing anybody with the property owners. We're just
no.
putting a little bit of, at least they have to come back to the board for any projects they're gonna propose.
And I think just want to be clear, like, we're not suggesting that we rezone the properties or reduce the densities on the properties, but just really focus on, specifically developing, zoning, especially for zoning language that you're avoiding, developing on some of the, more natural, the more important natural resources on the property. Also encouraging cluster, like development, or potentially requiring cluster development on certain properties. In this way, you're still getting the same number of units, but but what you're doing is you're preserving, open space and the
Right.
natural resources.
And it won't be a surprise to the property owner or to the developer who's coming in,
Right,
we'll know
there'll
ahead
be
of
a
time.
there'll be a public hearing on all of this as we go through the process, so ultimately the property owners could come out and raise concerns or provide their feedback on that, but so there will be a public process associated with it.
Okay, great.
I have a couple questions. So cluster development, what does that look like? Are those townhomes? Are they single family homes? What is that?
Right, so that's part of what we're gonna be looking at for your regulations and tweaking that, but it could be any one of those, and that's what we're gonna come back to the board with, and then you'll be able to provide some feedback. So it could be townhomes, it could be like duplexes, it could just be single family homes on smaller lots. A lot of times cluster regulations have varies. depending upon what we, what you develop. And I think in your, I believe in, I can't recall if the cluster allows for multifamily. I think it just allows for your lot sizes to be a little bit modified, but these are things that other cluster regulations do allow for, like, different types of unit types as well. But you're still keeping the same densities that would be afforded to you if developed as single family housing.
And then also, what does it look like if, let's say, somebody wants to develop on this land? But we have these protections in place. Are the properties they're building have to be smaller? They have to be built like not on. I'm trying to envision what we're talking about.
Yeah, sure. So what it would really be is the concept would be, instead of having, like, let's just say, for example, I believe the Mary Knoll property is 1 acre zoning, I think something like that.
It might be two.
Or, yeah, so either way, it's, so it requires 1 or 2 dwelling units per acre. So instead, and typically in a cluster subdivision, if something requires 1 dwelling unit per acre, and let's just say there's 5 acres, you get 5 units. Well, maybe somebody would come forward and say, okay, well, we're gonna develop, instead of all 5 acres with 5 units, we're only gonna develop, like, 2 acres with the 5 units, right? And each and then each unit would have, let's just say, for like example, like a half an acre land, instead of a full acre.
Okay.
So instead of.
The way your
2,
code,
3, 4, 5,
the way your
it'd be
code
like-
currently reads, the number of units,
Remain.
dwelling units you can have in a cluster development cannot exceed what you would otherwise have if it were a traditional subdivision or development. So you can't, I mean, one thing that the board may want to consider is some sort of density bonus for cluster development. But the way it's currently written in the code is that you can only get the number of units that you would otherwise be able to get, in the opinion of the planning board, right? So if you have to take into account steep slopes, wetlands, or other types of environmental factors. So those are all aspects that can be looked into to kind of encourage that type of development in order to preserve open space.
Right, and I think that's part of what the next step would be, is to take a look at your cluster subdivision regulations and also identify if there's any particular, I'm gonna say, obstacles or something that would encourage somebody to move in one direction versus another. Because the idea would be to really try to encourage the clustering and to keep a lot of the open space. And so whether that's ultimately something as Christy mentioned, like an incentive, and it could be even an overlay on these, like some of the key properties or some of your larger lots. And then that overlay would allow for like incentives to do the clustering, so there's a number of different options. And so we're going to explore those, but the idea would be to kind of push those properties to, if they ever do get redeveloped, to redevelop with the cluster in mind. Now, I mean, like in some of your other properties, for example, like the Mary Knoll, you already have some really nice existing buildings there. So maybe that's another incentive to potentially like reuse, existing so these are things that we can explore. But those would also, again, all then lend themselves to, if you do this, then to give back to the amenities to the town would be to preserve some of the open space.
Christie, is there any height restriction when you cluster in our code now? Because usually when you cluster, you go up either a story and the height of the buildings. Is there anything that restricts how high they can be?
Oh, yeah.
It does give the planning board discretion to modify based upon the circumstances. But generally, you still have to comply. It's if composed of attached dwelling units, a cluster development shall comply with the bulk regulations contained in 222 for multifamily residence district.
Bless you.
Talking and breathing is hard. If composed of detached dwelling units, the cluster development shall comply with the bulk regulations contained in 200-21 of the R5 one family residence district.
Good.
Right, and just to, just to understand the, when you add up all the, like, I'm gonna see the key parcels that we identified in the open space plan. You're looking at about, close to 300 acres. So it's not a small amount, even though there's not a lot left in the town. But these are your larger properties. These are properties that are right now very much, to some extent, already pretty wooded, so, and already have other natural resources on them, which is part of the reason why they're probably haven't been developed at this point. So, and it kind of also lends itself a little bit more to the reasons why to potentially try to create, I guess, create avenues for developers to be able to cluster while also preserving these resources.
Okay, I think one of them may already have a approved site plan on it, but
Right, well, right, and then that's one of the things that we can also take a look at, because if for some reason at some point, sometimes it's good to have site plans that have never been acted upon. Typically, a lot of those will expire and we can double check to see if there's expirations.
okay. Okay,
Right,
I mean, I'm
and
good to
something-
move forward.
One of the things that generally with subdivisions in the town, they don't do site plan, right? Because single family homes
Yeah.
don't require site plan approval under your current code. But for a cluster development, the zoning code does provide that site plan is required in addition to subdivision. So there is the opportunity for the planning board to look at, all of the units being proposed in relation to each other on a greater and more specific, site-specific level than you otherwise would as part of subdivision or ARB review.
Right, and I think one of the, and one of the proposed changes to the zoning is to require site plan for the new single family homes because of the stormwater aspects and stuff like that too. But so we'll be talking about that as well, but currently, no, you do not require site plan.
Okay, I feel like we should, honestly.
Well, and I think that's why we're proposing that. Other zoning that you're gonna be reviewing.
Does the cluster thing work outside the open space plan too?
So the proposal right now, so that's, so to answer your question, yes, under certain circumstances for subdivisions, like we had one recently that was on the Morningside Drive. Not Morningside Drive, I'm sorry. My gosh, it was the
Somerstown?
Somerstown, thank you. So we were looking at cluster there. So a lot of, at this point in time, there is a number of applications when they do come in for subdivision, they do look to cluster. However, I think these regulations would kind of promote even more clustering than some of the applications that we actually do see. And then when I say by that is because sometimes it's like they reduce the lot sizes, but there still is, a decent amount of the property still being proposed to be developed. This would have like, ideally maybe something like 50% of the property, preserved, and the other 50% could potentially be redeveloped.
And the open space corridor, we're working toward seeing if we can connect some of these properties to.
Yes, I think that's where like we started identifying some of and that's where like, when Chrissy was mentioning some of the incentives, where these are the types of things that we could put into the zoning to kind of incentivize people to either develop the trails or connect those trails, and then, maybe it is something like get a little bit of additional density, but again, with the idea of preserving, your open space, natural resources, developing trails. So, and some of that, is definitely there with amongst the, specifically, if you look at 23 and 24, they were identified for potential recreation connectivity. Same with, properties 27 and 28. And then 12 through 14 up by the Indian Brook, Reservoir area. Those were also identified as potential like recreation connectivity. So these are all things that we can take a look at as well.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I definitely would vote to move forward.
Too, yeah. I'm good.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, stick around for a minute, please.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. All right, well, thank you for joining us for our discussion. More to come. And we will see you next week, 25th, for our legislative meeting at the courthouse. Executive session, sorry, for advice of counsel, advice of planner. I don't know if that's a thing. That is not a basic. Okay, advice of counsel, personnel, pending litigation. I think that's it.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.